Right now, I want you to pick a number, the amount of money that would finally make you feel secure, truly comfortable, enough. Maybe it's paying off your debt. Maybe it's $1 million. Maybe it's just a few hundred more a month. Whatever it is, hold it in your mind. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. If you actually got that number, every cent of it, you would not feel the way you think you'd feel. Within a few months, that amount would feel completely normal, and a new number, a little higher, would quietly take its place. Because there is a hidden mechanism in the human mind that moves the finish line every single time you get close to crossing it. It's the reason a person making $30,000 dreams of 60, the person making 60 dreams of 120, and the billionaire sitting on more money than 100 lifetimes could spend still wants more. So what is this thing? Why does enough always stay just out of reach? And is there any way to actually catch it? Because if you can understand this one mechanism, you can finally do something almost no one does. You can step off the machine. Let's start with what's actually happening because it has a name, and once you see it, you'll spot it everywhere in your life. Psychologists call it the hedonic treadmill. And the metaphor is perfect. Picture yourself running on a treadmill, sprinting as hard as you can and going absolutely nowhere. That is exactly what your mind does with good fortune. You get something you wanted, you feel a spike of joy, and then, quietly, you adapt. The new thing becomes your new normal. The joy fades back to where it started, and you're left needing the next thing just to fill that spike again. Think about the last big thing you bought or achieved. The phone you couldn't wait to own, the raise you celebrated, the apartment you were thrilled to move into. Remember how exciting it was for a while, and then how it slowly became just your phone, just your salary, just the place you live. The thrill didn't last. It never does. Because you don't adapt to it once you adapt to it completely until it's invisible. So that's the treadmill. But naming it is the easy part. To really understand how powerful it is, you have to see what it does to the people who supposedly won the game completely. And for that, we go back to one of the most famous studies in the history of psychology. In 1978, researchers tracked down a group of major lottery winners, people who had just received the exact windfall most of us spend our lives fantasizing about. And they compared their happiness to ordinary people, to regular folks who hadn't won anything at all. Now, what would you expect? The winners should be dramatically, obviously happier, right? They just had every money problem erased in an instant. Here's the first surprise. They weren't. The lottery winners were not significantly happier than the people who hadn't won a thing. But that's not even the strange part. The strange part is what the windfall did to the rest of their lives, because the researchers found that the winners actually took less pleasure from ordinary, everyday things. A good cup of coffee, a conversation with a friend, a nice morning. All the small, free joys that make up most of a human life, the winners enjoyed them noticeably less than everyone else. Think about what that means. The giant win didn't just fail to make them happier. It raised the bar for what could impress them so high that normal life started to feel gray by comparison. They gained the extraordinary, and it quietly poisoned the ordinary. So now we're getting somewhere darker and more useful. Because this points to why your number will never be enough, and it's not the reason you'd guess. You probably assume the problem is that you just haven't reached your number yet. That the feeling of not enough is a signal you're still too far away, and it'll switch off once you finally arrive. Here's the misdirection, and it's the key to everything. That feeling will never switch off because your number is a mirage. The instant you reach it, your mind resets, and the exact same feeling of almost, but not quite, reappears just at a higher altitude. The dream apartment becomes the baseline you now expect. Last year's raise becomes this year's normal. Barely remembered. You don't arrive at enough and stop. You arrive, you adapt, and the finish line politely takes 10 steps back. This is why wealth, chased this way, behaves like drinking salt water to quench your thirst. Every gulp feels like relief for a moment and leaves you thirstier than before. But why? Why are we built with a satisfaction system that seems almost designed to sabotage us? There are two engines driving it, and you'll recognize both. The first is adaptation, the one we've been describing. You simply get used to whatever you have. The second is comparison, because you don't measure your wealth in a vacuum. You measure it against the people around you. And here's the trap inside the trap. As you climb, the people around you climb too. Get the raise, move to the nicer neighborhood, and suddenly you're surrounded by people with even bigger houses and even nicer cars. You brought a bigger ruler, but everything you're measuring got bigger too. You never feel ahead because you keep changing who you stand next to. And this isn't just a personal quirk. It happens to entire nations. Economists found something they called the Easterlin paradox. Over the last several decades, some countries became 3-4 times richer per person, and their average happiness barely moved at all. An entire society got dramatically wealthier, filled its homes with comforts its grandparents couldn't dream of, and ended up feeling about the same. Because as the whole country's income rose, everyone's expectations rose right along with it. The treadmill isn't just in your head. It's in all of our heads at once. So by now you might be feeling a little hopeless. If this is hardwired into us, and even entire civilizations can't outrun it, what chance do you have? But before we get to the way out, there's a surprise waiting, because this mechanism you've been cursing is not actually your enemy. Remember that famous study, the lottery winners? There was a second group in it. The researchers also studied people who had recently been paralyzed in devastating accidents, and logic says they should have been permanently, catastrophically miserable. But they weren't. Yes, they were less happy than average, but nowhere near as unhappy as you would expect. Over time, they had adapted and drifted back up toward their old baseline. Sit with that, because it's beautiful. The exact same mechanism that stills the joy from your success is the mechanism that rescues you from your suffering. The treadmill that flattens the thrill of a raise is the same treadmill that carries you back up from the worst day of your life. Adaptation is the reason human beings can survive grief and loss and disaster and slowly feel okay again. It was never a curse. It's a survival tool, one that just happens to make it very hard to stay impressed by money. You cannot have the part that heals you without the part that keeps you wanting. They are the same machine, which leads to a conclusion that flips this entire chase on its head. You'd assume the people who escape this are the ones who finally climb high enough. But look again at this lottery winners who couldn't enjoy a coffee anymore. The higher your baseline climbs, the more it takes to move you, and the more the small joys flatten out. The billionaire isn't chasing more because he's greedy. He's chasing the exact same, not quite enough feeling you are. He just needs a vastly bigger number to fill it, and ordinary pleasures went silent for him long ago. Climbing higher was never the way off the treadmill. Climbing higher is the treadmill. Now, before we get to what actually works, I have to be honest with you, because taken too far, This idea becomes a lie that comfortable people tell to dismiss real struggle, because this treadmill is not equally real at every level. Adaptation is powerful when you're going from comfortable to rich, but at the bottom, it barely works at all. People do not adapt to the grinding stress of not making rent, of skipping the doctor because they can't afford it, of choosing between heat and food. That kind of hardship doesn't fade into a new normal, it stays painful, because it's a threat to survival itself, and escaping it produces real, lasting improvements in well-being that do not evaporate. So let me be very clear. No amount of money is ever enough is, in large part, a wealthy person's problem. If you're below the line, more money genuinely, durably helps, and anyone who tells you otherwise is usually someone who's never had to worry about it. The treadmill is real, but it mostly kicks in after your actual needs are met. And a fair warning on the science itself. That famous lottery study was small, just a couple dozen winners and decades old. The strong version of this idea, the one claiming your circumstances don't matter at all, has been pushed back on hard. We now know set points can genuinely shift, and that some wounds don't fully heal. The direction is solid and shows up even across whole nations, but it's a powerful tendency, not an iron law. So here's the real question, the one that actually matters. If chasing a bigger number doesn't work, and you can't just decide to stop wanting things, then how does anyone ever feel like they have enough? Here's the answer, and it's the opposite of everything the treadmill trains you to do. The escape was never to run faster. It's to notice a loophole in the machine itself. Not everything adapts at the same speed. We adapt almost instantly to stuff. The car, the gadget, the bigger house go invisible within weeks. That's the treadmill at full power. But there are a few specific things that the treadmill struggles to flatten. Novel, varied experiences, which stay vivid precisely because they keep changing. Close relationships, which deepen instead of fading. A sense of progress towards something that matters to you. And strangest of all, gratitude, the deliberate act of noticing what you already have before your mind quietly files it under normal and stops seeing it. This is why the research keeps landing in the same place. Effortful, changing, meaningful experiences resist adaptation in a way that possessions simply never can. A new gadget makes you happy for a week. A deep relationship, a growing skill, a life pointed at something you care about. Those keep paying out for years. So the answer was never to kill your ambition or pretend you don't want things. The move is to stop pouring your wanting into the bucket with the hole in the bottom, the endless upgrades that go numb in a month, and start pouring it into the few things that hold their value. You redirect the hunger instead of trying to starve it, because the people who actually feel like they have enough are almost never the ones who finally hit some magic number. They're the ones who realized the number was a mirage, stepped off the machine, and looked around at a life that was already quietly worth being present for. Enough was never an amount waiting for you at a finish line. The finish line doesn't exist. It moves the instant you approach it, and it will keep moving until the day you die, as long as you're chasing it. Enough is a decision. It's the moment you stop sprinting after the next number long enough to notice the ground you're already standing on. The treadmill only wins if you believe the next number is the one that finally makes it stop. It isn't. It never was. And the strange, quiet secret is that the moment you truly stop running is the moment you finally arrive. Next time on this channel, we're going to follow that idea into the one resource the wealthiest people guard far more fiercely than money. The one thing you can never earn more of, no matter how rich you become, and the simple calculation that changes how you value every single hour of your life.